Good afternoon, everyone. It's fantastic to be here today, and I'm just going to be sharing some insights and some thoughts from my own personal journey in being a pioneer, and also working a lot with other pioneers and leaders. Interesting, Darwin. His house is just a mile away from where I live. And sometimes I wander around the gardens in there and where he wrote The Origins of the Species. And it was his bicentenary just a couple of years ago. And I wonder what Darwin would think now if he was alive and observing our Earth and observing how we've evolved. I think that his quote, it's not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent. It is the one that is most adaptable to change. So it's not about strength, it's not about intelligence, it's about adaptability. And maybe those words are even more pertinent for us now. I love what this picture evokes. Here you've got some people in a boat, whitewater rafting. Has anyone ever been whitewater rafting? All right, excellent. Well, then you'll know exactly what the feeling feels like when you're there on the edge, hanging on the edge, just about to go over the edge. It's exhilarating, it's scary. And I like to sort of term the way that maybe some of the mindsets and skill sets that we need to be able to innovate and to be able to pioneer as calling it whitewater leadership. There's also a sense of adventure here. And I think that spirit of adventure, that sense within us all, that desire to just go out into the unknown. Sometimes it's a bit more latent in some of us, and some of it's more observable and more discoverable. But it's something that if we can tap into, can just help drive that pioneering spirit. So I like to call this sort of whitewater leadership, and I want to sort of just tell you a little bit about my own story, just to highlight some of these things in terms of what we're going to look at over the next few minutes. When I was 9, my parents became missionaries, and they were quite radical, my parents, and they just decided to jack it all in and become hippies, really. They left the safe life of jobs and employment, and off we went on the road. And a lot of their friends at that time said, "You're mad to take your kids out of school. You know, they're not going to have a good education. They're not going to be able to survive in the world." But my parents were adamant about what they wanted to do, and so off they went. And there started really what has shaped me in terms of taking me forward into pioneering different areas in politics, in not-for-profit organisations, in the corporate world, and also as an entrepreneur. And they needn't have worried, because both my sister and I did turn out okay educationally. I got 3 degrees in politics, economics, and social psychology, and an MBA, and my sister became a very successful teacher. But at that time, all those years ago, it was seen as something that you don't do. You don't take your children out of school. And I think that when we look at what shapes us and we look at what enables us to become pioneers, those early formative years of our life are really important. And it worries me sometimes when I look at educational systems now, in the sense that it's not really bringing up kids to deal with the unforeseen, to be able to adapt to change. So these skills or mindsets, which I just have up here: objective attachment, clear intent, courageous agility, creative collaboration, skillful adaptation and focused reflection. I think these are the mindsets that are really required, probably even more so now in our uncertain world, and being able to actually work and be in that boat with other people, being able to stay afloat and being able to surf those winds and rivers of change. So if we have a look at objective attachment, I think this is quite an interesting terminology. How can you be both objective and attached at the same time? As entrepreneurs, we tend to be very, very passionate about the ideas that we have, and 100% plus, working day and night. And that's absolutely fantastic. You feel amazing senses of energy, of power, of purpose in what you're doing. But passion can also be quite a dangerous thing if it becomes something that you can't actually stand back from and be objective about. So holding that balance, that dilemma between both being objective and passionate is really important. It enables you to make insightful decisions, and it's not so much being detached, but actually being able to let something go and then also see it come back again. Clear intent. You know, what good is a 5-year plan in being an entrepreneur? You know, even when you can't even see what is happening next year or next month or even next week or tomorrow in many cases. Yet we're taught very much within business school and within the world of corporate life that you do all these very, very detailed planning, which, it's not bad, and it's always good to have a sense of where you want to go. But I think we need different maps as pioneers, maps more like this that are less linear and more lateral, that can help open us up to new ways of thinking about where we want to go. I can remember when I set up my current organisation 4 years ago. I was with my husband in the garden, and we sat down with a bottle of wine, as you do, and a bit of paper and a pen, and we were writing down all the companies that we were absolutely certain were going to give us some work and how much we thought they were going to give us. And we're saying, oh yeah, we're totting it up and we're getting quite excited about it. Not one of those companies actually gave us any work. And what it taught me was actually you've just got to be open to both creating opportunities and spotting opportunities. And the work that did come to us came from all different sorts of places which we hadn't even imagined would happen. I think it's this ability to paint pictures of future scenarios, both for yourself and collectively with other people, of what could be, what could emerge, and to have more emergent type of leadership rather than necessarily being very directive. It's about being in that boat and surfing those waves and surfing those currents, because that is what is going to be hitting you all the time in terms of pioneering. It's not a straight, nice, calm river. So courageous agility. Here we have this guy in his boat looking very purposeful and determined. It's interesting, a few months ago I was reading an article in the British Airways in-flight magazine on one of the long flights that we were taking. And I was reading a story about Heston Blumenthal. He's a famous chef. He's a 3-star Michelin chef in England. And he has a restaurant called The Fat Duck. And the interviewer was asking him and said to him, so Heston, what do you think when people say you're such a pioneer? And he said, well, he laughed and he said, it's very easy for people to say you're a pioneer once you're a success. If I hadn't have been a success, they would have said I was a fool. And it made me think, I'd like one day to write a book. I'd like to call it The Unsung Heroes, the 9 that never made it. We often read about organizations, new companies setting up, and we read that 9 out of 10 fail. And the only reason that we're ever hearing the stories are the ones that have actually succeeded. The ones that you read about are the ones that have been successes. And so everyone's telling their story and you go, oh, wow, against the odds, they made it. Just when they were running out of cash, something came in, or whatever it might be. But what about those 9 that never made it? And I think it's interesting when we look at failure and how we deal with failure. I've been in 2 failed ventures. And it's interesting when you go through that experience. And now I'm standing here in my 3rd entrepreneurial venture. And, you know, it's great pioneering it. But I'm not standing here from that point of saying, oh, and now we're a massive international organisation, multi-million-pound business, and we did all this against the odds. I'm in that journey. And I think that it's very much about being pioneers and being honest and being open about your own journey as you're taking it. When I finished my A-levels, I decided to take a gap year. And I wanted to just go off and see the world a bit. Different parts of the world that I hadn't seen as a child with my parents. And that 1 year turned into 2 years, and then into 3, and then into 4, and then into 5 years of traveling with a suitcase, living every 3 months, moving on into a different place. And what that taught me was that sense of just tapping into your own courage and just going out there and experiencing different things. I worked with street children in Bogota in Colombia. I worked with very poor families in Manila and Smoky Mountain, and headhunters in Luzon in the Philippines. I smuggled Bibles into China and got caught. Tell you about that one later. But all of those things were defining moments, and I think traveling the world and then going into education. I actually started my first degree when I was 23. It was a completely different experience because I'd seen so many different types of things. And that actually seeing education as a means to change the world rather than just to get another degree is a really important thing, and to really cherish the fact that we can have education, because so many people in the world can't. Creative collaboration. There was a Times survey recently in the UK that talked about meaning and purpose being one of the most important thing that people are looking for in jobs today. Above pay, above benefits. And I think that's a really important thing when you're an entrepreneur and you're designing a venture and you're getting people to join in and collaborate with you. Gone are the days of the lonesome pioneer on their horse going into the sunset. We need each other, and we need each other's skill sets. And it's really important to be able to work together and collaborate together and to create that sort of shared vision. I think some of the challenges that we're now focusing in the world are going to really require more and more innovation and more collaboration, because we can't do it on our own. The challenges are too complex. And collaboration isn't just a soft word, it's a tough word. It's hard to collaborate, to really genuinely collaborate with other people. Darwin talked a lot about adaptation. And it can often be easy to believe your own jargon when you're in business on your own and you love your stuff so much. And people aren't buying it, and you're just like determined to carry on, try and sell that stuff. But you know, what you've got to learn is you need to make your values be of value to other people. And so that people will want to buy and to be serviced by you, because they actually see the value in what you're giving and what you're creating. So adaptation is absolutely fundamentally important, and I think open innovation and the ability to continually collaborate and innovate with other people, with partners, with customers, with clients, is going to become more and more important. We're going to see more and more about that. And the last one, focused reflection. Maybe, I think, one of the hardest skill sets of the pioneer, because we have very little time to reflect. We're so busy in our action orientation to just keep on going and to keep pushing the doors and to try to make things happen. But to actually stand back and take time for reflection and to have focused reflection is a fundamental requirement for having a calm mind, and something I think that's going to be really important increasingly as we go forward. Now, getting out of that boat for a moment and just drawing up on the side of the river. And I think it's quite interesting with a lot of the leaders that we work with. We're finding more and more things like meditation, martial arts, yoga, all these types of things are starting to infiltrate more into the business world because people are seeing a need to actually calm the mind so that they can make more rational, more clear decisions about what they're doing. I think there are two types of focused reflection. One is about stilling the mind, and one is about observing the thoughts that are just racing through the mind. So I'd like to do a little experiment with you over the next 30 seconds. I'd like you to shut your eyes and just count to 10 in your mind. And then every time a thought comes in your mind, or you realize actually you've stopped counting and you're thinking about something, is to just start counting again. It's a very interesting little exercise to do, and when you can do that for half an hour, then you know that you're actually starting to calm the mind down from all its chattering that's going on. So just for 30 seconds now, just try this out. Just close your eyes, don't fall asleep, and just count 1 to 10, 1, 2, 3, up to 10, and just see what happens. Okay. So I expect your minds were wandering a little bit and thinking about this and that. It's an interesting one to become a witness to one's own thought pattern and to see and observe those thoughts and to realize you are not your thoughts. They're just rising in the consciousness of your own awareness. And the more that you can actually witness yourself and understand yourself, the more clear that the decisions hopefully that you can make and at least be able to ride those waves of change. It's interesting within a lot of science now that they're saying that people who meditate and practice these types of activities are actually developing and changing their brains. That the insula becomes thicker in the brain of meditators. People who do this for hours on hours a day probably. And the insula is that area in the brain which actually controls pain. So something to think about is developing practice around things that work for you and in pioneering to actually take that time of focused reflection. So we are living in unprecedented times. We're in these boats of little businesses, organizations, or activities, projects, and often we don't quite know where we're going, and that's okay, as long as we have clear intent about what we're doing, what we're trying to achieve. And I think that in all of us, there is this creative impulse, there's this spiritual impulse, there's this something that is always calling us forth. And sometimes that can get buried in the busyness of life, buried in our responsibilities. But it's about tapping into that again and having the courage to be able to step out of one's comfort zone, dip one's toes in the water of the unfamiliar, and create these different mindsets of entrepreneurial, pioneering leadership. Thank you.